She was betrayed by her family and was forced into marriage and later discovered her husband as a wealthy millionaire. My stepmother's voice cut through the cold village air like a blade, dripping with desperation she could no longer hide. We came to visit Vivienne. Family should be together for the holidays, do you not think? I turned slowly, my cashmere coat brushing against my legs, my hand instinctively moving to rest on my pregnant belly. There they stood on the cobblestone street. Millicent with her designer clothes, now slightly worn at the edges. Cordelia with her honeyed curls limp and unwashed. My father shuffling his feet like a scolded child, unable to meet my eyes. The same people who had sold me like livestock 18 months ago. I looked at them, and I felt nothing but cold, distant pity. You want money, I said. It was not a question. My father finally spoke, his voice cracking. The truth is, Vivienne, we have had some financial setbacks. We thought perhaps your husband could help. We are family after all. Family. The word hung in the air between us like smoke from a dying fire. You made it quite clear I was no longer family when you signed the papers selling me to a stranger to pay your gambling debts. You did not even bother to ask who he was. You did not care if he would be kind or cruel. You were simply glad to be rid of me. Cordelia stepped forward, her pretty face twisted with the same spite I remembered from years of torment. Listen here, you ungrateful little nothing. You are living in luxury while we suffer. You owe us. Before I could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. Is there a problem here? Gabriel appeared beside me, his hand settling protectively on my lower back. My husband, the man they had dismissed as a simple farmer. The man who was, in truth, one of the wealthiest men in the United Kingdom. The transformation in my family's faces was almost comical. Aggression melted into fawning obsequiousness in the space of a single heartbeat. But Gabriel was not fooled. His storm gray eyes swept over them with the same careful assessment he used when evaluating horses for his world-renowned breeding program. And he found them wanting. You must be the family that treated my wife as a burden, he said, his voice calm but cold as Highland winter. The family that stole her inheritance, denied her education, and sold her to a stranger without asking a single question about who he was. I watched Vivienne for months before I approached your husband about the marriage. I saw exactly how you treated her. I heard the cruelties you whispered when you thought no one was listening. He paused, letting his words sink in like stones dropped into still water. I chose not to reveal my circumstances specifically because I wanted to see exactly how callously you would dispose of her. My father's face had gone the color of old milk. Millicent's practiced smile had frozen into a mask of fear. Cordelia looked like she might be sick right there on the cobblestones. Have you ever felt completely invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most? Have you ever been so beaten down by those who should have protected you that you began to believe you deserved nothing? Have you ever walked through the ashes of everything you thought your life would be, wondering if you would ever feel whole again? I have, and this is my story. But I need you to understand something before we go any further. This is not just a story about betrayal, though there is plenty of that. This is not just a story about cruelty, though the cruelty I endured still echoes in my nightmares. This is the story of how the worst thing that ever happened to me became the doorway to everything I never knew I was searching for. It is the story of how being sold like property led me to a man who saw me as priceless. It is the story of how rock bottom became the foundation for a life beyond my wildest dreams. My name is Vivienne Ashford. Well, it was Vivienne Ashford. Now, I am Vivienne Thornwood. And the journey between those two names is the most painful, beautiful, transformative journey a person could ever take. It begins, as so many tragic stories do, with a death. Before we dive into how I went from discarded daughter to the wife of one of Britain's wealthiest men, I need to ask you something. If you have ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or written off by people who should have believed in you, hit that like button right now. This story is for everyone who has been told they do not matter. And trust me, you are going to want to stick around for what happens when I discover the truth about the stranger I was forced to marry. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to the life I had before it all came crashing down. The Ashford estate sat on 200 acres of rolling English countryside, a Georgian manor house that had been in my family for 7 generations. I grew up in those halls, surrounded by portraits of ancestors who had shaped history, walking gardens my great-great-grandmother had designed, riding horses descended from champions my grandfather had bred. My mother was the heart of that place. Elizabeth Ashford, with her warm brown eyes and her laugh that could fill the largest room. She taught me to ride before I could properly read. She read me poetry by the fire on winter nights. She held me when I cried, and celebrated when I triumphed, and made me believe, truly believe, that I was capable of anything. My father adored her. In those early years, before grief broke something fundamental inside him, he was a good man. Attentive, present, proud of his only daughter, and the legacy we would one day share. I remember the last truly happy Christmas we had together. I was 17 years old, and the snow had fallen thick and white across the grounds. My mother and I built a snowman outside the kitchen windows while my father watched from inside, pretending to read his newspaper, but really just watching us with a smile that reached his eyes. That night, gathered around the fire with hot chocolate and carols playing softly in the background, my mother took my hand. "Vivienne," she said, her voice soft but serious. "Whatever happens in life, I need you to remember something. Your worth is not determined by how others treat you. It is not measured by money or status or what you can provide to someone else. Your worth is inherent. It lives inside you. No one can take it away unless you let them." I did not understand then why she was telling me this. I thought it was just one of her philosophical moments, the kind of wisdom mothers pass to daughters without any particular urgency. I had no idea she was preparing me for what was coming. The doctors found the tumor 3 months later. Pancreatic cancer, already stage 4 by the time they caught it. The timeline they gave us was optimistic, they said. 6 months, perhaps a year if the treatments worked. The treatments did not work. I watched my mother, my beautiful, vibrant, irreplaceable mother, fade away over the course of 4 agonizing months. The last week, she could barely speak, but she held my hand, and she looked into my eyes, and she whispered the same words she had spoken at Christmas. "Stay strong, Vivienne. Promise me. No matter what happens, stay strong." I promised. I held her hand until it went cold, and then I went to find my father to tell him his wife was gone. He was in his study, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle. When I told him, he did not cry. He did not hold me. He just looked at me with eyes that had already gone somewhere far away, and he said, "Leave me alone, Vivienne. I need to be alone." I was 18 years old, grief-stricken and terrified, and my father could not even look at me because I had my mother's eyes. That was the beginning of the end of everything I knew. The months that followed my mother's death were a blur of grief and confusion. My father retreated into himself, spending long hours in his study with the door locked. I would hear the clink of crystal glasses late into the night. When he emerged, his eyes were red, his speech slurred, and he looked at me like I was a stranger. I tried to carry on. I handled the condolence letters, managed the household staff, kept the estate running as best I could. I was supposed to start university that fall, Oxford, to study literature. My mother had been so proud when I received the acceptance letter. But when I mentioned it to my father, he waved his hand dismissively. "There is no money for that now, Vivienne. Your mother's medical bills. The investments have not performed well. We need to economize." I did not question him. I was too lost in my own grief to examine his excuses closely. Looking back, I realized the gambling had probably already started. The slow hemorrhage of our family fortune was already underway. 6 months after my mother's funeral, my father announced he was getting married again. I remember the exact moment he told me. We were at dinner, the 2 of us alone at a table meant for 12, the silence between us thick as fog. He cleared his throat and said it as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. "I have met someone, Vivienne. Her name is Millicent. She has a daughter about your age. They will be moving in next week." I stared at him, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "Next week? You have known this woman for how long?" "Long enough," he said, and his tone made it clear the conversation was over. Millicent hardly arrived on a Tuesday. I watched from my bedroom window as the car pulled up the drive, carrying the woman who would systematically destroy my life over the next 6 years. She was beautiful. I will give her that. Tall and elegant, with auburn hair swept into a sophisticated chignon and cheekbones that could cut glass. She wore designer clothes and carried herself with the practiced grace of someone who had spent years perfecting her appearance. Her daughter Cordelia stepped out behind her, the same age as me, 18, with honeyed blonde curls and a smile that showed too many teeth. She looked up at the manor house with an expression I did not recognize then, but would come to know intimately. It was hunger, pure, calculating hunger. "Be nice to them," my father said when he introduced us later that day. "They are family now." Millicent's smile was warm and her words were welcoming, but her eyes were cold as she looked me over. I saw her gaze catalog my simple dress, my unmanicured nails, my grief-swollen face. I saw her dismiss me as no threat, no competition, no obstacle of any significance. She was right about one thing. I was not a threat. I was prey. The changes started small, so small that I did not even notice them at first. Cordelia needed the bedroom with a better light for her art projects, so I was moved to a smaller room in the east wing. Cordelia was exhausted from the stress of the move, so the household routines were adjusted around her needs. Cordelia found my horse difficult to ride, so he was sold and a gentler mare purchased in his place. A mare that somehow became Cordelia's, while I found myself without a mount at all. My mother's jewelry began to disappear. Just a piece here and there at first. When I asked about it, Millicent smiled her cold smile and said my father had needed to sell some items to cover household expenses. When I asked my father directly, he would not meet my eyes. "Your stepmother handles those matters now," he said. "I trust her judgment." The Oxford acceptance letter had been quietly discarded. When I asked about reapplying, Millicent laughed as if I had told a particularly funny joke. "University, darling? In these economic times? Besides, you seem so delicate. I really do not think you are cut out for the academic rigor. Better to stay home and learn practical skills." I was 18 years old, then 19, then 20, and every avenue of escape was being methodically closed. I tried to fight back at first. I confronted my father about the missing jewelry. I demanded to see the household accounts. I applied to universities secretly, using the last of my personal savings to pay the application fees. But every rejection letter found its way to Millicent's hands before mine. Every conversation with my father ended with him siding with his new wife. Every complaint I raised was twisted into evidence of my instability, my jealousy, my inability to accept change. "You are always so negative, Vivian," my father would say, echoing words that Millicent had whispered in his ear. "Why can you not just be happy for me? Why can you not accept that things are different now?" The staff who had known me since childhood were replaced one by one with people loyal to Millicent. The few who remained were too afraid for their jobs to ally with me. By my 21st birthday, I was essentially a servant in my own ancestral home. I cleaned while Cordelia lounged by the pool. I cooked while Millicent hosted elaborate dinner parties with my mother's silver. I mended clothes while my stepfamily spent money I later learned they did not have. Because that was the truth I did not discover until much later. My father's gambling had devoured not just my mother's jewelry and the household savings, but the estate itself. Mortgages had been taken out, paid off, taken out again. Investments had been liquidated. The appearance of wealth was just that, an appearance. A hollow shell propped up by credit and denial and the desperate hope that the next bet, the next hand, the next race would turn everything around. I lived in that hollow shell for 6 years. 6 years of humiliation and hunger, and the slow erosion of everything I believed about myself. "You are useless, Vivian. You are ungrateful. You are difficult. You are a burden. You are nothing without us. No one else would want you. You should be thankful we keep you around at all." I heard these words so often that I began to believe them. The girl who had dreamed of Oxford and literature and making her mother proud became a shadow, a ghost haunting the halls of her own home, trying to take up as little space as possible. But through it all, I clung to my mother's words like a lifeline. "Stay strong. Promise me." I did not feel strong. I felt broken, beaten, hollowed out. But I kept breathing. I kept waking up each morning. I kept existing, even when existence felt like a punishment. I did not know then that survival itself is a form of strength. I did not know that sometimes holding on through the darkness is all the courage the universe requires of you. I did not know that my salvation was coming, dressed in the most unlikely disguise imaginable. I did not know about Gabriel Thornwood, and I certainly did not know that my family was about to sell me to him. The night my fate was sealed started like any other. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes from a dinner I had cooked but had not been invited to eat, when I heard raised voices from my father's study. This was not unusual. My father and Millicent argued constantly now, usually about money, but something in the tone made me pause, my hands still in the soapy water. I crept down the hallway, staying in the shadows, and pressed my ear to the study door. Millicent's voice was shrill with barely contained panic. "How could you be so stupid, Harold? How could you let it get this bad? They are going to take everything. The house, the land, everything." My father's response was slurred, the words running together in a way that told me he had been drinking since midday. I thought I could win it back. The odds were in my favor. You do not understand how these things work, Millicent. Next time, I can fix it. There will be no next time. Millicent's voice dropped to a venomous hiss. The creditors are coming next week. We have nothing left to sell. Nothing except... The pause that followed was thick with implication. Except what? My father asked. What else is there? Your daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to grip the doorframe to keep from collapsing. Vivian? What are you talking about? How would Vivian help anything? Marriage. Harold. There are men who will pay handsomely for a wife from a good family, a legitimate name, breeding and bloodlines even if there is no fortune attached. I have already made inquiries. There is a man in Scotland, some sort of farmer or tradesman. He has expressed interest. He is willing to pay off all your debts in exchange for her. Another long pause. When my father spoke again, his voice was small, the voice of a man who knew he was about to do something unforgivable. She will never agree to it. She does not have to agree. Millicent's tone was brisk, businesslike. She is your daughter. You can sign the papers yourself. She is 24 years old, unmarried, with no education and no prospects. You would be doing her a favor, really. Giving her a purpose. A future. I did not hear my father's response. My legs carried me back to the kitchen on autopilot, my mind spinning with what I had just learned. They were going to sell me. Like furniture. Like livestock. To a stranger I had never met, in a place I had never been, for a life I could not imagine. I should have run. I know that now. I should have walked out the door that very night with nothing but the clothes on my back and never looked back. But where would I have gone? I had no money, no skills, no friends, because Millicent had systematically isolated me from anyone who might have helped. I did not even have identification. My passport, my birth certificate, everything was locked in my father's study. I was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. 3 days later, my father summoned me to his study. Millicent sat beside him, wearing an expression of barely concealed triumph. Cordelia lurked in the corner, smirking. Sit down, Vivienne. My father gestured to a chair across from his desk. I have some news. I sat. My hands were trembling, so I folded them in my lap to hide it. I have arranged a marriage for you. To whom? My voice came out steadier than I expected. His name is Gabriel Thornwood. He lives in Scotland near the Highlands. He is a farmer of some kind, or a tradesman. A simple man, but respectable. Is a good match, Vivian. Better than you deserve, really. Millicent leaned forward, her cold eyes glittering. He has agreed to pay off all of your father's debts in exchange for your hand. Is that not generous? You should be grateful that anyone wants you at all, considering you bring nothing to the table except your name. When is this supposed to happen? I asked. 3 days, my father said, and I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Shame, perhaps, or maybe just discomfort at being confronted with the reality of what he was doing. The papers are already signed. It is done, Vivienne. There is no point in fighting it. Cordelia could not contain herself any longer. Her laugh rang out, bright and cruel. Oh, this is perfect. Vivienne, married off to some Scottish peasant. You will probably be churning butter and milking cows for the rest of your life. Try not to mess that up too, will you? I looked at my father, at the man who had once carried me on his shoulders and taught me to fish in the stream behind our house. The man who had promised my dying mother he would take care of me. Please, I said, please do not do this. I am your daughter. He looked away. The decision has been made, he said. You leave in 3 days. Those 3 days were the longest and the shortest of my life. I was confined to my room under the pretense of preparing for my journey. In reality, it was a prison sentence. Meals were left outside my door. My windows were watched. Any attempt to leave would be met with force, Millicent made clear. On the second night, I found a small trunk at the foot of my bed, filled with the few possessions I had been allowed to keep. A few dresses, practical and plain. A pair of sturdy shoes. My mother's copy of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's collected poems, the only item of hers that had escaped Millicent's purging. I held that book and cried until I had no tears left. At the bottom of the trunk, I found the wedding dress I would be expected to wear. I pulled it out and stared at it in disbelief. It was Millicent's dress from her first marriage before she had perfected her gold-digging techniques. Yellowed with age, musty with neglect, at least 2 sizes too large for my thin frame. The final indignity, the final humiliation. I was not even worth a new dress. The morning of my wedding dawned gray and wet. Rain lashed the windows of the car that drove me to the chapel, a crumbling stone building on the edge of the estate. No family car, no ceremonial procession, just a hired vehicle and a driver who would not meet my eyes. I walked into that chapel wearing a borrowed dress that hung off my shoulders like a shroud. My hair was pinned up hastily, my face pale and unpainted. I had no flowers, no veil, no music, except for the wheezing of an ancient organ played by a vicar's wife who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. The chapel was nearly empty. A handful of villagers sat in the back pews, drawn by curiosity rather than celebration. In the front row, my father sat with his head bowed, Millicent beside him radiating satisfaction, Cordelia taking photographs on her phone as if this were entertainment. And at the altar, waiting for me, stood the stranger I was about to marry. My first impression of Gabriel Thornwood was of size. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against a dark suit that looked slightly worn at the cuffs. His hair was nearly black, falling in unruly waves across a forehead that seemed permanently furrowed with thought. His face was angular, weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble. He looked like a man who worked with his hands, a man who spent his days under open skies rather than in offices or drawing rooms. A farmer, just as they had said, a simple man from a simple life. But then I reached the altar, and his eyes met mine. They were gray, not the soft gray of morning clouds, but the deep, turbulent gray of storm seas. And in those eyes, I saw something I did not expect. I saw pain. It was just a flash, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. But in that moment, something passed between us, some recognition that we were both here under circumstances neither of us had fully chosen. The vicar cleared his throat and began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Gabriel Thornwood and Vivian Ashford. The words washed over me like water over stone. I heard them, but they did not penetrate. My eyes were fixed on the man before me, trying to read something, anything in his expression. He stood perfectly still throughout the vicar's droning. When it came time to speak his vows, his voice was deep and steady, carrying a slight Scottish accent that softened the harsh English vowels. I, Gabriel, take you, Vivienne, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Simple words, ancient words, words spoken by millions of people throughout history. But from his lips, they sounded almost like a promise, almost like they meant something. Then, it was my turn. I opened my mouth, and for a terrible moment, nothing came out. My throat had closed completely, refusing to give voice to this surrender. Gabriel's eyes held mine. In them, I read a question, a silent offering. I will not force this, his gaze seemed to say. If you cannot speak, I will not make you. But what choice did I have? Where else could I go? I thought of my mother. Stay strong, Vivienne. Promise me. And I spoke. I, Vivienne, take you, Gabriel, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. The vicar smiled, clearly relieved that this uncomfortable affair was nearly over. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Gabriel did not move to kiss me. Instead, he simply offered his arm, his expression unreadable. I took it. My hand trembled against his sleeve, but he pretended not to notice. Together, we walked back down the aisle. As we passed my family's pew, I heard Cordelia whisper something to Millicent about finally being able to sell the East Wing furniture without my pathetic protests. I kept my eyes forward, my chin lifted. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Outside the rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy and gray. A battered Land Rover waited by the chapel gate, already loaded with my small trunk of possessions. Gabriel opened the passenger door for me. His movements were courteous, careful, like someone handling something fragile. It is a long journey, he said, his voice low so that only I could hear. We will be on the train for about 12 hours, then driving for another 2. If you need to stop at any point, just say so. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As I climbed into the vehicle, I took one last look at the chapel, at the estate beyond it, at the life I was leaving behind. My father stood at the chapel door. For just a moment, our eyes met. I saw something flicker across his face, some shadow of the man he used to be, the father who had loved me. Then Millicent took his arm and led him back inside, and he was gone. I did not cry. I was beyond crying now. I simply turned to face forward, watching the only home I had ever known disappear in the rearview mirror. Whatever waited for me in Scotland, whatever life this stranger had planned for me, it could not be worse than what I was leaving behind, or so I told myself. The train journey was a study in silence. Gabriel had booked a private compartment, a small kindness I had not expected. We sat across from each other, the countryside rolling past the window in shades of green and gray and gold. He read a book on agricultural innovations. I stared at the passing landscape and tried to imagine what my future held. Periodically, he would look up from his reading and ask if I was comfortable, if I was hungry, if the temperature in the compartment was acceptable. His questions were always practical, always courteous, always delivered in that deep, steady voice with its softening Scottish accent. I answered in monosyllables. Yes, no, thank you. He did not push for more. He simply nodded and returned to his book, giving me the space I so desperately needed. As the hours passed, I found myself studying him covertly, trying to understand the man who had purchased me. His hands were large and calloused, the hands of someone who worked the earth. But they were gentle as they turned the pages of his book. His face in repose was stern, almost forbidding, but there were lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than his current expression indicated. He was not handsome in the classical sense. His features were too strong, too weathered, too marked by whatever life he had lived before this moment. But there was something compelling about him nonetheless. A solidity, a steadiness, the sense that here was a man who would not be easily moved from whatever course he had set. "What have you gotten yourself into, Vivian?" I wondered, silently. "And why does this farmer have the money to pay off my father's crushing debts?" I did not ask. I was not ready for answers yet. When the train finally reached our destination, night had fallen. The station was small and poorly lit, the platform empty except for a lone attendant who nodded to Gabriel as if they were old acquaintances. The Land Rover was waiting in the car park, the same battered vehicle that had driven us from the chapel. Gabriel loaded my trunk into the back and opened my door without ceremony. 2 more hours, he said. "The roads get rough near the end, but we should arrive before midnight." I nodded and climbed in. The Scottish Highlands in darkness were nothing like anything I had experienced before. The road wound through terrain that seemed to have no end, hills rising on either side like sleeping giants. Occasionally, headlights would illuminate a lone sheep or a stone wall, brief glimpses of a world that felt ancient and untouched. Gabriel drove with quiet competence, his large hands steady on the wheel. He did not seem to need conversation, which was fortunate because I had none to offer. I must have dozed at some point, because the next thing I knew, Gabriel was speaking. "We are nearly there. The property is just over this ridge." I straightened in my seat, blinking away the fog of exhausted sleep. I had prepared myself for the worst. During the endless hours of travel, I had imagined every possible scenario. A drafty cottage with no running water. A crumbling farmhouse filled with dust and despair. A life of hard labor on some remote patch of unforgiving land. I had prepared myself to survive whatever came next. What I had not prepared myself for was the truth. The Land Rover crested the ridge, and my breath caught in my throat. Below us, illuminated by the pale glow of a rising moon, lay an estate that defied everything I had been told, everything I had imagined, everything I thought I understood of a stranger sitting beside me. A grand stone manor house rose from the landscape like something from a dream. Ancient towers and modern wings blended seamlessly together, windows glowing with warm light. Hundreds of acres of carefully maintained grounds stretched toward the horizon, dotted with white-fenced paddocks where shadows of magnificent horses stood silhouetted against the moonlight. In the distance, I could see outbuildings, stables, workshops, and what appeared to be a modern agricultural complex gleaming with glass and steel even in the darkness. This was not a farmer's cottage. This was not a tradesman's humble homestead. This was an empire. "Welcome to Thornwood Hall," Gabriel said quietly. I turned to stare at him, confusion and suspicion warring in my chest. "I do not understand," I managed. "My father said you were a farmer, a tradesman." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face, the first real expression I had seen from him since the wedding. "Your father did not ask many questions, and I did not offer many answers. He was interested only in the money, not in its source. But Who are you? The question came out more desperately than I intended. What is all this? Gabriel pulled the Land Rover to a stop before the manor's grand entrance, where a uniformed butler already stood waiting despite the late hour. When my husband turned to face me, his gray eyes held a complexity I could not begin to decipher. "My name is Gabriel Thornwood," he said, "and yes, I am a farmer, among other things. I breed and train some of the finest horses in Europe. I also hold the patents on 17 agricultural innovations currently in use across 4 continents. The Thornwood Foundation, which I established 10 years ago, funds sustainable farming initiatives in developing nations." He paused, and something almost vulnerable flickered across his strong features. "I am also, as the tabloids occasionally remind me, one of the wealthiest men in the United Kingdom, though I much prefer it when people forget that particular detail." I sat in stunned silence as the butler opened my door and offered a gloved hand to help me step out. The cool night air of Scotland filled my lungs, carrying the scent of heather and horses and something clean and wild. My mind was reeling. The implications of Gabriel's revelation cascaded through my thoughts like a waterfall. My family had sold me to a man they believed to be a humble farmer. They had accepted whatever sum he offered without negotiating, without investigating, without asking a single question about who he was or why he wanted me. They had been so eager to rid themselves of me, so focused on their immediate debts, that they had not bothered to look beyond their own assumptions. And Gabriel had let them believe the lie. "Why?" I whispered as Gabriel appeared beside me, offering his arm. I looked up at the grand house, at the staff visible in the doorway, at the wealth that surrounded me on every side. "A man like you could have anyone. Why would you agree to this arrangement? Why would you marry someone like me?" He looked down at me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his composed facade, a flash of raw emotion that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. "That," he said softly, "is a conversation for another time. For now, let me show you your new home." Now, what happens next completely changed everything I thought I knew about my situation. But before I reveal how Gabriel's true identity transformed my understanding of why I was there, I want to hear from you. Have you ever walked into a situation absolutely certain you knew what to expect, only to have reality completely blow your mind? Drop a comment below with your story. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because you do not want to miss how this unfolds. Now, back to Thornwood Hall and the mysteries it contained. The interior of the manor was even more impressive than its exterior suggested. As I stepped through the grand entrance, I found myself in a foyer that managed to be both magnificent and somehow welcoming. Ancient stone walls were softened by warm tapestries and modern lighting. A grand staircase swept upward, its dark wood banister polished to a gleam. Fires crackled in hearths that looked like they had warmed this space for centuries, but it was not ostentatious. There were no gaudy displays of wealth, no gilded frames or crystal chandeliers screaming of money. Everything was tasteful, practical, chosen for quality rather than show. "Mrs. Campbell will show you to your rooms," Gabriel said, gesturing to an elderly woman who had appeared at the base of the staircase. She was plump and kind-faced, with white hair pinned beneath a simple cap and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Welcome to Thornwood Hall, Mrs. Thornwood," the housekeeper said, and the name, my new name, hit me like a physical blow. "I hope your journey was not too tiring. I have had a light supper prepared for you, and your rooms are ready." Your rooms. Plural. I glanced at Gabriel, but his expression gave nothing away. "Thank you, Mrs. Campbell," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That is very kind." As I followed the housekeeper up the grand staircase, I could not help looking back over my shoulder. Gabriel stood in the foyer, watching me go. In the firelight, his expression was impossible to read. What have I gotten myself into? I wondered for the 100th time that day. And what does this man want from me? The rooms Mrs. Campbell showed me to were located in the west wing of the manor, as far as possible from the master chambers she mentioned casually, which were in the east wing. "Your sitting room, Mrs. Thornwood," the housekeeper said, opening a door onto a beautiful space decorated in soft greens and creams. Beyond it, your bedroom, your dressing room, and a private bathroom. Mr. Thornwood wanted you to have everything you need for your comfort. I walked through the suite in a daze. The sitting room was larger than my entire bedroom at my father's house had been. The bedroom featured a canopy bed that looked like it had been made for royalty. The bathroom had both a clawfoot tub and a modern shower. The dressing room contained racks of clothing in my size, simple but high quality, with tags suggesting they had been purchased recently. "Who are these clothes from?" I asked. Mr. Thornwood had them ordered when he learned you would be arriving, Mrs. Campbell said. He said you would need practical clothing for country living. He asked me to purchase whatever I thought a young lady might require. I hope they are satisfactory. I touched the sleeve of a cashmere sweater, softer than anything I had worn in years. They are more than satisfactory, I said. They are beautiful. Thank you. Mrs. Campbell's face softened with something that looked like approval. I will let you rest now, Mrs. Thornwood. Breakfast is served at 8, but if you need anything before then, there is a bell pull by the fireplace. Do not hesitate to ring. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Mrs. Thornwood, if I may say something. I have worked for the Thornwood family for 40 years. I have known Mr. Gabriel since he was a boy. He is a good man, the best man I have ever known. Whatever brought you here, whatever arrangement was made, please know that you are safe under this roof. I stared at her, unable to formulate a response. She smiled gently and closed the door behind her. I stood alone in my luxurious prison, surrounded by comfort I had not experienced in years, and tried to understand what was happening to me. A farmer, my father had said, a simple tradesman. Instead, I found myself married to a millionaire, perhaps a billionaire, a man who lived simply despite his wealth, a man who had deliberately concealed his status from my greedy, careless family. Why? The question circled my mind like a hawk over prey. What did Gabriel Thornwood want from me, and why had he gone to such lengths to get it? I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the window of my beautiful bedroom and watched the Scottish dawn break over the hills, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Somewhere in this grand house, my mysterious husband was also awake, also watching the sunrise. I could feel his presence like a weight in the air. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow, I will get answers. But even as I made that promise, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered something that surprised me. You are not afraid of him. It was true. Despite everything, despite the strangeness of my situation and the uncertainty of my future, I was not afraid of Gabriel Thornwood. I did not know yet if that was wisdom or foolishness. I did not know that the answers I sought would change everything I thought I understood about myself, about love, about what it means to be truly seen by another person. I did not know that the man who had purchased me like property would become the man who finally made me feel priceless. All I knew, as I watched that first Scottish sunrise through my new bedroom window, was that my old life was over, and whatever came next would be nothing like what I had imagined. The weeks that followed my arrival at Thornwood Hall were unlike anything I had experienced before. I woke each morning to breakfast served in my sitting room, trays laden with fresh fruit and warm pastries and coffee exactly the way I liked it, though I could not remember telling anyone my preferences. My days stretched before me empty of obligation, free of demand, devoid of the endless labor and humiliation that had defined my existence for 6 years. I could go anywhere, read anything, eat whenever I was hungry, sleep whenever I was tired. The freedom was so foreign to me that at first I did not know what to do with it. So I explored. Thornwood Hall contained 47 rooms, I learned, not counting the service areas. There was a music room with a grand piano that gleamed in the morning light, a conservatory filled with exotic plants that seemed impossible in the Scottish climate, a billiards room that looked like it had not been used in years, and a library that made me weep the first time I saw it. 3 stories of books, thousands upon thousands of volumes, from ancient leather-bound classics to modern paperbacks, from scientific journals to poetry collections. A rolling ladder allowed access to the highest shelves. Deep leather chairs were positioned near windows that overlooked the grounds. A fire burned constantly in the massive hearth, filling the space with warmth and the subtle scent of wood smoke. I found Gabriel there on my 3rd morning at Thornwood Hall. He was standing by one of the windows, a book open in his hands, so absorbed in his reading that he did not hear me enter. For a moment, I simply watched him. In the morning light, with his guard down, he looked younger than he had seemed during our journey. There was a softness to his expression that I had not seen before. Then he sensed my presence and looked up. That softness vanished, replaced by the careful neutrality I was coming to recognize as his default expression. "Good morning, Vivian. Did you sleep well?" I nodded, though the truth was I had barely slept at all. "I am sorry to intrude. I was just exploring and found this room." "You are not intruding." Gabriel closed his book and set it aside. "This is your home now. You may go anywhere you wish. Do anything you wish. There are no locked doors here, no forbidden areas. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. No locked doors. How many doors had been locked to me in my father's house? "Thank you," I said. "That is generous." "It is not generosity. It is simply how things should be." He crossed the room to a small table where a tea service had been laid out. "Would you like some tea? Mrs. Campbell keeps this pot filled constantly. She says I would forget to eat entirely if left to my own devices." I accepted the cup he offered, careful not to let our fingers touch. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, two strangers bound by law, but not by understanding. "You have questions," Gabriel said finally. "I can see them in your eyes. You have been waiting to ask them since we arrived." I looked down at my tea, then back up at him. "Yes, I have many questions, but I do not know where to begin." "Begin wherever you like. I will answer what I can." I took a breath. "Why did you not tell my family who you really are? Why let them believe you were just a farmer?" "Because I wanted to see how they would treat you when they thought there was nothing to be gained." Gabriel's voice was quiet, but intense. "A wealthy man learns quickly that people perform for money. They smile and flatter and pretend respect, but it is all a mask. I wanted to see what lay beneath the mask your family wore." "And what did you see?" "Cruelty, indifference, a father who would sell his daughter to a stranger without asking a single question about who that stranger was or how he would treat her. A stepmother who saw you as nothing more than a problem to be solved. A stepsister who delighted in your humiliation." His gray eyes met mine, and in them I saw something that looked almost like anger, though not directed at me. "I saw people who did not deserve you, Vivian, and I saw you, surviving in the midst of them, holding on to some core of yourself that they had not managed to destroy." The words struck something deep inside me, a place I had kept carefully guarded for years, ever since I learned that showing vulnerability only gave people weapons to use against you. "Why do you care?" I asked, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "You do not know me. We are strangers. Why would you go to such lengths for someone you have never met?" Gabriel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "That is a longer story. One I will tell you, but not yet. For now, I need you to understand something. You are safe here. You are free here. Whatever expectations you have, whatever fears you carry, set them aside. I did not bring you here to be a servant or a prisoner. I brought you here to give you a chance at a life you were being denied." I stared at him, trying to find the lie in his words, trying to find the hidden agenda, the secret motive, the inevitable catch. I found nothing but sincerity. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing you are not willing to give," he said. And with that, he picked up his book and left the library, leaving me alone with my questions and the faint, impossible stirring of something I had not felt in years. Hope. The pattern of our days began to take shape. We took meals together in the dining room, Gabriel at the head of the table and I to his right. We talked about safe topics, the weather, the horses, the books we were reading. He asked about my interests, my education, the things I had dreamed of doing before my stepmother had closed every door. I told him about Oxford, about the literature degree I had wanted to pursue, about the poetry I still wrote in secret, scribbling lines on scraps of paper when no one was watching. He listened with genuine attention, asking thoughtful questions, remembering details I mentioned days or weeks later. He never interrupted, never dismissed, never made me feel that my thoughts were unimportant or my dreams were foolish, but he kept his distance. We were husband and wife in name only. He never attempted to touch me beyond what courtesy required. He never entered my rooms. He never suggested that our arrangement should be anything more than what it appeared to be, two people sharing a house but living separate lives. I should have been relieved. After years of having no control over my own existence, his respect for my boundaries should have felt like a gift. Instead, I found myself confused, unsettled, watching him across the dinner table and wondering what went on behind those storm-gray eyes. It was Mrs. Campbell who finally began to unlock the mystery. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into my stay, a fierce storm rolled across the highlands, making it impossible to venture. Outside, I found myself in the kitchen, drawn by the warmth of the massive hearth and the smell of fresh bread baking. Mrs. Campbell welcomed me with a cup of tea and a plate of shortbread. "You are settling in," she observed, more a statement than a question. "I am trying," I said, "but there is so much I do not understand. About the house, the estate, about my husband." Mrs. Campbell nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting this conversation. Mr. Gabriel is a complicated man, she said. But then, complicated men usually have complicated histories. He has not told you about his past yet. I shook my head. He says he will, but he has not. The housekeeper was silent for a moment, her kind eyes growing distant with memory. It is not my place to tell you everything, she said finally. Some things he should tell you himself, but perhaps I can help you understand why he is the way he is, why he keeps his distance, why he struggles to let anyone get close. I would appreciate that, I said. Mrs. Campbell settled into the chair across from me, her hands wrapped around her own teacup. I have worked for the Thornwood family for 40 years, she began. I came here as a young kitchen maid when Mr. Gabriel was just a boy of 7. His father, the elder Mr. Thornwood, was master of the house then. And he was a monster. She spoke the word simply, without drama, as if stating an obvious fact. He was a drunk and a bully. He had inherited this estate from his father and proceeded to drink away every penny that was not tied up in trusts. He beat his wife. He beat his children. He made this beautiful place a house of fear and pain. I felt my stomach clench. What happened to Gabriel's mother? She died when he was 14, Mrs. Campbell said. The official cause was pneumonia, but those of us who knew her understood the truth. She was worn down, worn out, exhausted by years of cruelty and fear. She simply stopped wanting to live. The housekeeper's voice softened. Young Gabriel tried to protect her. From the time he was old enough to understand what was happening, he put himself between his father and his mother, between his father and his younger siblings. He took beatings that were meant for others. He learned to read his father's moods, to know when to hide the little ones, when to distract, when to simply endure. My throat was tight. I thought of my own suffering, the years of emotional abuse and neglect. It seemed small compared to what Gabriel had survived. How did he escape? I asked. His father died when Gabriel was 17, Mrs. Campbell said. Fell down the stairs one night after drinking himself insensible. Some said it was an accident. Some said the stairs were steeper than usual that night, if you take my meaning. Either way, Gabriel became master of Thornwood Hall overnight. She shook her head in wonder. He was 17 years old, with a crumbling estate, 3 younger siblings to raise, and nothing but his own determination to see him through. But he did it. He worked the land himself, dawn to dusk. He found investors. He learned everything he could about agriculture, about horses, about business. By the time he was 25, he had not only restored the estate but expanded it tenfold. That explains his success, I said slowly. But it does not explain why he married me, why he keeps his distance. Mrs. Campbell hesitated. There is more to the story, she said. Something that happened when he was young and foolish before he built the walls around his heart. He was married before, Vivian. Did you know that? The words hit me like a splash of cold water. No, I did not know that. He was 22 years old, Mrs. Campbell continued. Her name was Isabel. She was beautiful and charming, and she told him she loved him. He believed her. Why would he not? He had so little experience with love. His father had never shown him any. His mother had loved him, but been too broken to protect him. What happened? Isabel did not love him, Mrs. Campbell said bluntly. She loved his money. Or rather, she loved the idea of his money. But Gabriel had learned from his father's mistakes. He kept the bulk of his wealth in trusts and foundations, living simply despite his means. He gave generously to charity but spent little on himself. I thought of the worn cuffs on his wedding suit, the practical Land Rover, the clothes in my closet that were high quality but simple, chosen for durability rather than fashion. When Isabel realized she could not access the kind of money she had dreamed of, she became bitter, Mrs. Campbell continued. She said terrible things to him, called him cheap, called him cold, said no woman could ever love a man like him, that he was too damaged, too broken, too scarred by his past to ever be worthy of real affection. The cruelty of it took my breath away. To say such things to a man who had survived so much, who had built so much from nothing. She left him, I said. It was not a question. She left him for a man who promised her the flashy lifestyle she craved, emptied their joint accounts on her way out the door, sent him a letter from Monaco telling him she had never loved him, that the marriage had been nothing but a means to an end. Mrs. Campbell's eyes were sad. That was 8 years ago. Since then, he is focused only on his work, his horses, his charitable projects. He told me he would never marry again, never risk that kind of pain. The walls he built around his heart grew higher and thicker with every passing year. Then why did he marry me? I asked. If he swore never to marry again, why would he agree to an arrangement like this? Mrs. Campbell smiled gently. That is not my story to tell, she said. But I think, when you are ready, he might tell you himself. She reached across the table and patted my hand. What I can tell you is this. He came back from a trip to London 3 months ago, and he was different. Determined, almost hopeful in a way I had not seen in years. He said he had met someone, a woman being mistreated by her own family, sold off to pay debts like property rather than a person. He said he could not stand by and watch it happen. You, Vivian. He was talking about you. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. He married you to save you, Mrs. Campbell continued. But I think it was more than that. I think he saw something in you that reminded him of himself. Someone who had been wounded by the people who should have protected them. Someone who understood what it meant to survive when everything seemed designed to break you. She squeezed my hand. He keeps his distance because he is afraid, she said. Afraid of wanting something he does not believe he deserves. Afraid of opening his heart and being destroyed again. But I have seen the way he looks at you when you are not watching, Vivian. The walls are still there, but there are cracks in them now. Cracks that were not there before. I left the kitchen that afternoon with my mind spinning. Gabriel had married me to save me. He had watched me from afar, seen my suffering, and intervened not because he wanted something from me, but because he could not bear to watch another person be crushed by those who should have loved them. He recognized me, I realized. Recognized the same wounds he carried, the same survival instinct that had kept him going through his own dark years. And he was afraid. Afraid of hope. Afraid of love. Afraid of reaching out and being rejected, betrayed, destroyed all over again. I understood that fear. I carried it myself. For 6 years I had learned that hope was dangerous, that every time I let myself believe things might get better, I was setting myself up for worse pain. That wanting something, anything, just gave people another weapon to use against me. We were 2 wounded animals, circling each other in the darkness, each of us afraid that reaching out would mean being bitten again. But as I walked back to my rooms, I found myself thinking about his eyes. Those storm gray eyes that held so much pain, so much restraint, so much carefully hidden longing. Maybe, I thought, maybe the walls were not meant to last forever. Maybe some walls were built to be broken. The change began subtly. I started seeking Gabriel out rather than avoiding him. I joined him in the library when I saw him reading by the fire. I asked questions about the estate, the horses, the foundation's work. I offered my opinions when he discussed challenges he was facing, and he listened to them with genuine interest. One evening, perhaps a month after my arrival, we were sitting in the library after dinner. The fire crackled in the hearth. Rain streamed down the windows. Gabriel was telling me about a new program the foundation was launching, providing sustainable farming equipment to communities in East Africa. You clearly care deeply about this work, I observed. May I ask why? It seems like more than just philanthropy. It seems personal. Gabriel was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. When I was young, he said finally, before my father drank away everything, we had good land. Fertile soil. The potential to grow anything. But my father did not care about the land. He cared only about what he could extract from it, what he could sell to fund his next binge. His voice grew distant. I watched that land become barren under his neglect. I watched the potential drain away season after season, and I swore that if I ever had the power to do something about it, I would help people who had good land but lacked the resources to make it thrive. He looked at me then, and there was vulnerability in his eyes. That is why I care, because I know what it is like to watch something beautiful be destroyed by someone who should have protected it. I held his gaze. We were not talking about land anymore. We were talking about something much more personal. I understand, I said softly. I understand better than you might think. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was weighted with meaning, with connection, with the first tentative threads of understanding being woven between us. Tell me about your mother, Gabriel said. The request surprised me. No one had asked about my mother in years. My family had erased her memory as thoroughly as they had erased my place in the household. But Gabriel was not my family. And somehow, in this quiet library with the fire crackling and the rain falling, it felt safe to remember. So I told him. I told him about her warmth, her laughter, the way she made every room brighter simply by being in it. I told him about the poetry she loved, the horses she rode, the way she taught me that my worth was not determined by what others thought of me. I told him about her illness and her death, about holding her hand in those final moments, about the promise I made to stay strong, a promise I had clung to through 6 years of darkness. By the time I finished, there were tears streaming down my face. I had not cried in years, had not allowed myself to cry. Tears were weakness, and weakness was dangerous. But here, in this moment, I could not hold them back. Gabriel did not speak. He simply moved from his chair to sit beside me on the sofa, close but not touching, his presence solid and warm. "She would be proud of you," he said quietly. "She would be so proud of the woman you have become, despite everything they did to try to break you." I looked at him through my tears. In the firelight, his face was soft, open, more unguarded than I had ever seen it. "How do you know?" I asked. "Because I can see her in you," he said. "The strength, the gentleness, the refusal to let cruelty make you cruel." He hesitated, then slowly, carefully, reached out and took my hand. "Vivienne," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I know I have kept my distance. I know you must have questions, doubts, fears about why you are here and what I want from you. But I need you to know something." "What?" "I did not bring you here expecting anything in return. I did not save you so that you would owe me. I saved you because I could not bear to watch another person be destroyed by the people who should have protected them. Because I saw you in that bookshop in London, and something in you called to something in me." He looked down at our joined hands. "I have spent 8 years building walls around my heart, telling myself I did not need anyone, telling myself that love was just another word for vulnerability, and vulnerability was just another opportunity to be hurt." He met my eyes. "But you make me want to tear those walls down, Vivienne. You make me want to believe that not everyone who gets close will hurt me. You make me want things I had sworn I would never want again." I could not speak. My throat was too tight. My heart was beating too fast. My entire being was focused on the man before me and the words he was saying. "I am not asking for anything," Gabriel continued. "I am not expecting anything. I just needed you to know the truth. You are not here as an obligation or a transaction. You are here because I saw you, and I wanted to know you. Not own you, know you." He released my hand and sat back, vulnerability flickering across his features. "If that frightens you, I understand. If you want to leave, I will not stop you. I will give you whatever resources you need to build a life somewhere else, somewhere away from me. You are not a prisoner here. I should have been frightened. Every instinct I had developed over 6 years of abuse told me to be suspicious, to look for the hidden motive, to protect myself from this obvious attempt at manipulation. But when I looked into Gabriel's eyes, I saw no manipulation. I saw only the raw honesty of a man laying his wounded heart at my feet and waiting to see if I would crush it. I reached out and took his hand. "I am not frightened," I said. "I am not going anywhere." And when I smiled at him, really smiled, for the first time in years, I saw the hope kindle in his storm-gray eyes like a flame catching dry tinder. Now, we have reached the part of the story where everything starts to change between Gabriel and me. But I want to pause here and ask you something. Are you rooting for us yet? Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you want to see these two wounded souls find love together. And if you are enjoying this story, share it with someone who needs to hear that good things can come from terrible beginnings. Now, let us watch these walls come down. The months that followed were a gradual awakening for both of us. Gabriel began teaching me to ride properly. The horses at Thornwood Hall were magnificent creatures, nothing like the gentle ponies I had ridden as a child. But Gabriel was patient, endlessly patient, guiding me through the basics without ever making me feel foolish for what I did not know. "Sit deeper in the saddle," he would say, his large hands adjusting my position, his touch always gentle, always careful. "Let your hips move with the horse, not against it." I fell off more times than I could count in those early weeks. But every time I hit the ground, Gabriel was there, helping me up, checking for injuries, encouraging me to try again. "Falling is part of learning," he told me once, brushing the mud from my jacket. "The only failure is not getting back up." I understood he was not just talking about horses. As my skills improved, we began taking long rides together across the estate. Gabriel showed me the hidden corners of Thornwood Hall, the places that did not appear on any map. A waterfall cascading down a rocky cliff, a meadow filled with wildflowers in spring, an ancient stone circle that he said had stood on this land for 3,000 years. But my favorite place was the loch. We reached it one morning at sunrise after riding for nearly an hour through the misty hills. The water was still as glass, reflecting the pink and gold of the sky so perfectly that it was impossible to tell where reality ended and reflection began. "My mother used to bring me here," Gabriel said quietly as we sat our horses at the water's edge. "When things were bad at home, when my father's rages were too much, she would wake me before dawn and we would ride out here together. She said the loch was magic, that it could heal any wound if you let it." I looked at him, at the man who had survived so much pain, who had built an empire from ashes, who was slowly, carefully opening his heart to me. "I believe her," I said. He turned to look at me, and something shifted in his expression. Something resolved. "Vivian, I have something to tell you." "What is it?" He took a breath. "You asked me once why I married you, why I went to such lengths to save a stranger I had never met. I told you I would explain when the time was right. I think the time is right now." I waited, my heart pounding. "3 months before our wedding, I was in London on business," he began. "I had meetings scheduled all day, but I found myself with a few hours free in the afternoon. I decided to visit a bookshop I had heard about, a small place specializing in rare poetry collections." He smiled slightly at the memory. "I walked in, and there you were, standing by the window, holding a book of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, completely absorbed in what you were reading. The light was falling on your face in a way that made you look almost ethereal, and there was such hunger in your expression, such longing for beauty, for meaning, for something beyond whatever life you were living. I felt tears prick my eyes. That bookshop had been my only escape, the one place Millicent allowed me to go because she considered it too boring to be worth monitoring. I could not stop watching you," Gabriel continued. "And then your stepmother arrived." He paused, and his expression darkened. "I saw the change in you, Vivian. The light drained from your face. Your shoulders hunched. You made yourself smaller, quieter, as if you were trying to disappear entirely. And that woman, she berated you in front of everyone, called you lazy, called you a waste of space, told you that you had no business reading poetry when there were chores to be done at home." He shook his head. "I have seen cruelty before. I know what it looks like, and I knew, in that moment, that you were trapped in a situation that was destroying you piece by piece. You followed me," I said. "It was not an accusation, just a statement of fact. I followed you," he confirmed. "I learned where you lived. I made inquiries about your family situation. The more I learned, the more horrified I became. The debts, the selling of your inheritance, the plans they were already making to dispose of you." He turned to face me fully, his eyes intense. "I could not save myself when I was young. There was no one to rescue me from my father. I had to survive on my own, and it nearly broke me. But I could save you, Vivian. I could offer you a way out, and I could not live with myself if I did not try. So, you arranged the marriage," I said. "I contacted your father through intermediaries. I let him believe I was a simple farmer, someone desperate enough for a wife that I would pay handsomely for one from a good family. I knew his type. He would not ask questions. He would not investigate. He would simply take the money and be glad to be rid of you." Gabriel reached out and took my hand. "I told myself it was charity," he said, "that I was simply giving a wounded soul a safe place to heal, that I expected nothing in return. But that was not entirely true," I said. "No," he admitted, "it was not entirely true. Because even then, even in that bookshop, watching you read poetry, I felt something I had not felt in years, something I thought I would never feel again." "What?" "Hope," he said simply. "You gave me hope, Vivian, just by existing, just by surviving, just by holding on to some spark of yourself that they had not managed to extinguish." We sat there on our horses by the magical loch, two broken people who had somehow found each other in the darkness. And then Gabriel said the words that changed everything. "I love you, Vivian. I did not plan to. I did not expect to. But watching you heal, watching you rediscover yourself, watching you become the woman you were always meant to be, I fell in love with you, completely and utterly." He paused, vulnerable. "You do not have to say it back. You do not have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know the truth." I looked at this man, this wounded, wonderful man, who had saved me not by asking for gratitude, but by simply giving me the freedom to become myself again. And I knew with absolute certainty what my answer would be. "I love you too," I said. His eyes widened. He had not expected it. He had prepared himself for rejection, for disappointment, for the pattern that had defined his adult life. "Truly?" he asked. "Truly," I confirmed. "Not because you rescued me, not because I owe you anything, but because of who you are beneath everything. The patience, the kindness, the wounded heart that still learned how to love." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Gabriel dismounted from his horse, reached up and helped me down from mine. We stood face to face by the still waters of the loch, our horses grazing peacefully behind us. He cupped my face in his large, calloused hands, gentle as if I were made of glass. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes," I breathed. And when his lips met mine, I felt something inside me that had been frozen for 6 years finally begin to thaw. It was not a perfect kiss. We bumped noses. We both laughed nervously. We were out of practice, two people who had spent so long guarding their hearts that they had almost forgotten what it felt like to open them. But it was our kiss, the beginning of our story, the moment when two broken halves became something whole. When we finally drew apart, Gabriel rested his forehead against mine. "I have waited so long for this," he murmured. I was beginning to think I would wait forever. "No more waiting," I said. "No more walls. We face whatever comes together." "Together," he agreed. And standing by the loch where his mother had taught him to hope, we made a promise to each other that neither of us would ever break. The transformation that followed was remarkable. I moved from my distant suite in the West Wing to Gabriel's chambers in the East Wing. For the first time, we were truly living together, truly sharing a life rather than simply coexisting under the same roof. Our days fell into a rhythm that felt natural, inevitable, as if we had been doing this forever. Mornings spent riding together across the estate. Afternoons working side by side, Gabriel on his business affairs and me increasingly involved in the foundation's projects. It turned out I had a gift for strategy. My mother had always said I had a sharp mind, and years of navigating Millicent's machinations had honed my instincts for anticipating problems and finding solutions. Gabriel recognized this immediately. "You should be leading this program," he said one day, looking over my notes on a new initiative to provide clean water to farming communities in sub-Saharan Africa. "Your ideas are better than anything our current directors have proposed." "Me?" I said, startled. "But I do not have any qualifications. I never finished my education." "Then, finish it," he said simply. "There are excellent universities in Edinburgh. If you want to continue your studies, I will support you in whatever way I can." I stared at him. After 6 years of being told I was too delicate for education, too useless to contribute anything of value, here was someone offering me the chance to become everything I had dreamed of being. I enrolled at the University of Edinburgh that autumn. The commute was long, but Gabriel arranged for a flat where I could stay when classes ran late, and he often drove me himself when his schedule allowed. I threw myself into my studies with a hunger that surprised even me. Literature, as I had always wanted, but also business and economics and international development. I wanted to understand everything. I wanted to make up for all the years that had been stolen from me. And Gabriel was there every step of the way, celebrating my successes, encouraging me through the challenges, never once making me feel that my ambitions were a burden or an inconvenience. This is what partnership means, I realized. This is what it feels like to be loved by someone who wants you to succeed. I became pregnant on a crisp autumn morning 2 years into our marriage. I remember the moment I knew for certain. I was standing in our bathroom, holding the test in trembling hands, watching the second line appear. Joy and terror flooded through me in equal measure. Joy because I wanted this, wanted a family with Gabriel more than I had ever wanted anything. Terror because I knew what it was to be failed by a parent, and I was terrified of failing my own child. Gabriel found me sitting on the bathroom floor, tears streaming down my face, the test still clutched in my hands. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately kneeling beside me. "What has happened?" I held up the test. He looked at it, and his face went through a transformation I will never forget. Shock, then wonder, then a joy so profound it seemed to illuminate him from within. "You are pregnant," he breathed. I nodded, unable to speak. And then Gabriel Thornwood, one of the wealthiest men in the United Kingdom, master of a vast estate and a global foundation, sat down on the bathroom floor beside his wife and wept like a child. "I never thought this would happen," he said, when he could speak again. I never thought I would have a family. A real family. Not the broken thing I grew up in, but something whole. Something built on love instead of fear. I took his hand and pressed it to my still flat belly. "We will build it together," I said. "We will give our children everything we never had. Love without conditions. Support without strings. A home where they are free to become whoever they want to be." He kissed me then, soft and reverent, a promise sealed with tenderness. "I swear it," he said. "I will be the father mine never was. I will protect them. I will cherish them. I will never, ever let them feel the fear and pain we knew." I believed him, because I knew him now. I knew the depth of his character, the strength of his commitment, the goodness that had survived everything his past had thrown at it. Our children would be safe. Our children would be loved. And our family would be nothing like the ones that had broken us. The pregnancy proceeded smoothly, and I gave birth to twin girls on a snowy January morning. Margaret and Eleanor, we named them, after Gabriel's mother and mine. They had his dark hair and my brown eyes, and they captured our hearts completely from their very first breath. Motherhood came more naturally to me than I had expected. Perhaps it was because I remembered so vividly what my own mother had given me, and I was determined to give the same gifts to my daughters. Perhaps it was because Gabriel was an equal partner in every way, changing nappies and walking the floor during colicky nights and never once suggesting that childcare was solely my responsibility. 18 months after the twins were born, I discovered I was pregnant again. This time with a boy. We named him James, after no one in particular. A fresh name for a fresh start, the beginning of a legacy that would carry no shadows from the past. My life was full now in ways I had never imagined possible. I completed my degree with honors, graduating at the top of my class. I took a leadership role in the foundation, developing programs that reached communities across 3 continents. I published research on sustainable development that was cited by policymakers around the world. And through it all, Gabriel was beside me, my partner, my champion, my love. Sometimes late at night when the children were sleeping, we would sit together by the fire in the library and marvel at how far we had come. "If you had told me 5 years ago that this would be my life," I said once, "I would not have believed you." "If you had told me 5 years ago that I would know this kind of happiness," Gabriel replied, "I would have laughed in your face." He took my hand. "You saved me, Vivian. I know I am supposed to be the one who rescued you, but the truth is that you rescued me just as much. You taught me that the walls I had built did not make me safe. They just made me alone. We saved each other," I said. "That is how it is supposed to work." "Yes," he agreed. "That is exactly how it is supposed to work." But even in the midst of all this happiness, I knew that the past was not finished with me yet. Somewhere out there, my family was still living, still scheming, still waiting for an opportunity to claw back what they believed they were owed. I just did not know how soon that opportunity would come. The confrontation happened on a crisp autumn day, nearly 3 years after my wedding. I had taken the twins into the village to do some shopping. They were toddlers now, full of energy and curiosity, and they loved the colorful displays in the local toy shop. I was kneeling down to help Eleanor with her shoe when I heard a voice that froze the blood in my veins. "Vivian, is that really you?" I stood slowly, every muscle in my body tensing, and there they were, my family. Standing on the cobblestone street like ghosts from a nightmare I thought I had escaped. Millicent looked older, harder, the lines around her eyes more pronounced than I remembered. Her designer clothes were slightly worn, not the pristine elegance she had once maintained. Cordelia stood behind her, her honeyed curls limp and unwashed, her expression hovering between spite and desperation. And my father. He looked like he had aged 20 years. His face was bloated, his hands trembled, and he could not meet my eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Millicent recovered first, her smile snapping into place like a mask. "We came to visit, darling. Family should be together, do you not think? We heard you had settled in Scotland and thought we should reconnect." The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. I looked at them, these people who had spent 6 years making my life a living nightmare, and I felt something unexpected. Nothing. Not anger, not fear, not even hatred. Just a cold, distant nothing. "You want money," I said flatly. "That is not fair," Millicent started. My father interrupted her, his voice cracking. "The truth is, Vivian, we have had some financial setbacks. The estate is gone. Creditors took everything. We have been living in a small, flat, barely getting by. Your stepmother and sister have had to find work. It has been very difficult." He shuffled his feet. "We thought perhaps your husband could help. He seems to have done very well for himself, and we are family after all." Family. I looked at the man who had sold me to a stranger to pay his gambling debts, the woman who had systematically destroyed my self-worth, the stepsister who had delighted in my humiliation. "You made it very clear I was no longer family when you signed the papers selling me to a stranger," I said. "You did not even bother to ask who he was. You did not care whether he would be kind or cruel. You were simply glad to be rid of me." Cordelia stepped forward, her face twisting with familiar spite. "Listen here, you ungrateful little nothing. You are living in luxury while we suffer. After everything we did for you, taking you in, feeding you, clothing you, you owe us." The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. Taking me in? I was born in that house. It was my home, my mother's home. You took me in like a snake takes in a nest of eggs. I gathered my daughters closer. I owe you nothing, less than nothing. You stole my inheritance, my education, my dignity. You sold me like livestock, and now you come crawling back, expecting me to save you? Then Gabriel appeared. He had been in the hardware shop, and something in my posture must have alerted him to the danger. He strode across the street, his tall frame radiating a quiet menace that made Millicent and Cordelia shrink back. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his hand settling protectively on my lower back. The transformation in my family was instantaneous. The hostility melted into fawning deference. Millicent's smile became even more forced. Cordelia actually tried to flutter her eyelashes. "Mr. Thornwood," Millicent gushed, "what a pleasure to finally meet you properly. We were just catching up with Vivian. We have heard such wonderful things about your estate, your businesses, your success." Gabriel looked at them with the same expression he used when evaluating horses that had failed to meet his standards. "You must be the family that treated my wife as a burden," he said. "The family that stole her inheritance, denied her education, and sold her to a stranger without asking a single question about who that stranger was." His voice was calm, but I could feel the anger vibrating beneath the surface. "I watched Vivian for months before I approached your husband about the marriage. I saw how you treated her. I heard the cruelties you whispered when you thought no one was listening. I chose not to reveal my circumstances specifically because I wanted to see how callously you would dispose of her." My father went pale. Millicent's smile faltered. Cordelia looked like she might be sick. "You have no claim on my wife," Gabriel continued. "No claim on her time, her affection, or my resources. But because Vivian is a better person than any of you deserve, I will make you an offer." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Leave this village. Never contact us again. In exchange, I will provide modest housing in a location far from here and a small monthly stipend. Enough to survive. Not enough to forget the consequences of your cruelty." "And if we refuse?" Millicent asked, a last flicker of defiance in her eyes. "If you refuse," Gabriel said, his tone hardening, "my lawyers will ensure that every creditor, every court, every authority you have evaded catches up with you. The choice is yours." They did not refuse. They knew they had no leverage. They had thrown away their only valuable asset, me, years ago. They were left with nothing but desperation and the bitter taste of consequences they had never imagined facing. But before they could slink away, I stopped my father. "Wait," I said. He turned, something like hope flickering in his rheumy eyes. "When Mother died," I said quietly, "I needed you. I was 18 years old, grieving and scared, and I needed my father. Instead, you brought strangers into our home and let them erase me. You watched them steal my inheritance, my education, my dignity. You signed papers selling me to a stranger without even asking who he was or if he would be kind." I held his gaze, willing him to understand the weight of what I was saying. "Do you know what kept me alive during those years? Mother's voice. Her last words, 'Stay strong.' I stayed strong for her, not for you. You do not deserve my strength." "Father, I did not mean to," he started. "I do not want your excuses. I do not want your apologies. They are 6 years too late. What I want is for you to understand exactly what you lost. I am happy. I am loved. I am building a life beyond anything I ever dreamed. And you will never be part of it." I reached for Gabriel's hand. "That is the cost of your betrayal. Live with it. I did not wait for a response. I gathered my daughters, took my husband's arm, and walked away without looking back. Behind me, I heard Cordelia begin to cry, Millicent snapping at her to be quiet, my father's shuffling footsteps as they retreated toward whatever bleak future awaited them. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel vindication. I felt only a profound relief, like setting down a weight I had carried for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. They were gone now, truly gone. The hold they had over me, the fear that they would somehow drag me back into darkness, was finally broken. I was free. That night, after the children were asleep, Gabriel and I sat together by the fire. "Are you all right?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "I think so." It was harder than I expected, seeing them, but also easier in a way. How so? I thought I would be angry, furious, that seeing them would bring back all the pain and helplessness I felt during those years. But instead, I just felt sad. Sad for who they could have been. Sad for what they threw away. I looked at my husband, at the man who had given me everything I never knew I was searching for. "And grateful," I said. "So incredibly grateful that their cruelty led me to you." Gabriel pulled me close. "Their cruelty was their choice," he said. "What you did with it, how you survived and grew and became the woman you are, that was your choice. Never give them credit for your strength, Vivienne. It belongs entirely to you." I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," I said. "I love you too," he replied. "More than I ever thought possible." Outside, the wind whispered across the highland hills. Inside, the fire crackled and our children slept peacefully in their beds. I had come to this place as a purchased bride, expecting nothing but suffering. I had found love, purpose, family, and a happiness so profound that some days I still could not quite believe it was real. The past was behind me now. The family that had tried to destroy me was gone. All that remained was the future, bright with possibility, stretching out before me like an uncharted map. And I was ready to explore every inch of it. 5 years passed. The nursery at Thornwood Hall had expanded to accommodate 3 children. Margaret and Eleanor were spirited and clever, with their father's determination and their mother's love of books. James was quieter, more thoughtful, content to sit for hours watching his father work with the horses. I had completed not just my undergraduate degree, but a master's as well. My research on sustainable development had been published in leading journals. I led programs for the foundation that touched hundreds of thousands of lives across 4 continents. And Gabriel and I had built something neither of us had ever thought possible. A marriage based on genuine partnership. A family rooted in love. A home where our children would never know the fear and pain we had experienced. One summer afternoon, we were all walking through the gardens together. The twins were running ahead, chasing butterflies. James was holding his father's hand, chattering about the foal that had been born that morning. I felt Gabriel's attention shift, and I followed his gaze to the far gate of the property. A figure stood there, middle-aged, shabby, white-haired, aged beyond his years. My father. He must have been released from whatever circumstances had held him elsewhere. He had found his way here, to the edge of the life I had built without him. He did not try to approach. He simply stood there, watching. And even from this distance, I could see the regret etched on his face, the longing for something he had thrown away and could never recover. "Do you want to speak to him?" Gabriel asked quietly. I looked at my father for a long moment. I thought about the childhood I had lost, the mother whose memory he had desecrated, the years of suffering I had endured because he had been too weak to protect me. And then I looked at my children, laughing in the sunlight, my husband, solid and strong beside me, the life we had created together. "No," I said finally, "the past is the past. It has no power here anymore." I turned away from the ghost at the gate. "Let us go home," I said, smiling at my family. "The children are hungry." Gabriel took my hand. James reached for my other hand. The twins came running back to join us. We walked toward the manor house, toward warmth and love and all the happiness we had built from the ashes of our broken beginnings. I did not look back. There was no need. They say the best revenge is a life well lived. For years, I thought that was just a pretty phrase, something people say to make pain seem meaningful. But standing here, watching my daughters chase butterflies while my husband teaches our son to walk, I understand it now. My family tried to destroy me. They sold me, discarded me, erased me. And because of that betrayal, I found my way to a man who saw me when I was invisible, who loved me when I thought I was unlovable, who gave me freedom when I expected chains. They meant my marriage as a punishment. It became my salvation. I am Vivian Thornwood. I was betrayed by my family and forced into marriage. And in that marriage, I found everything they tried to take from me: love, purpose, dignity, and a future brighter than any I could have imagined. To anyone out there still surviving their darkest chapter, hold on. Your unexpected salvation might be just over the next ridge, waiting to welcome you home. And that brings us to the end of Vivian and Gabriel's incredible journey. From betrayal to billion-dollar love, from discarded daughter to beloved wife and mother, this is a story about never giving up on the possibility of happiness. Now, I want to hear from you. Which moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it when Gabriel revealed who he really was? When Vivian confronted her father? When she walked away from the past for good? Drop your answer in the comments below. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that good things can come from terrible beginnings. And if you want more stories like this, stories of love, redemption, and the triumph of the human spirit, make sure you subscribe to Millionaire Love Stories with Mr. Shawn and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload.